Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver, our first Friday series. See if people are joining in the Zoominar as I speak, but I wanted to get started because we just have an hour for this fascinating topic. I'm Paul Teske. I'm the Dean of the School of Public Affairs, and I'm delighted that you all are with us today. We have a terrific panel to talk about a really, really exciting and interesting topic, I think. Kind of the future of downtown Denver. And we all know for the last year, we've lived in this strange and scary pandemic, but we think with vaccines and public health, we might be turning the corner, and sometime soon, people perhaps will be returning to a more normal life. But part of our question today is, what will that impact be on downtown Denver? And we have a great panel to talk about that. I also want to note that this series is monthly. Of course, it's the second Friday today. Normally, it's the first Friday, and we'll be back May 7th. And our topic will be the state legislature and kind of what the policies and issues have been, what laws they're passing in this year, which is different from many, I think, because they have money that they may not have expected from the federal government. And so there's more to do and maybe more interesting things going on. But please join us on May 7th if you're interested in that topic. Other than that, my job is to introduce our moderator today, Professor Todd Ely. Todd is an associate professor who runs our Center for Local Government here at the School of Public Affairs, as well as teaching in public finance and local government topics. He has a bachelor's degree from Emory, a master's from University of Arizona, and a PhD from New York University. He knows a lot about urban issues, and so we're excited to have him moderating our terrific panel. So with that, I'll thank you again for joining us and give it over to Todd.
Great, thanks, Paul. My role is really to just moderate and try to tap into the expertise we have on the panel. And so I'd like to just introduce the topic briefly and then introduce the panelists before we get started. So downtowns, we know, thrive on density. Human interaction at a really close scale, and the vibrancy, right, that people bring to a place. So prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, downtown Denver was booming. Long-term plans were coming together as office buildings, hotels, and other projects were filling in surface parking lots and other downtown spaces. Kind of fast forward to today, and as I made my way downtown to the office, there were signs of the pandemic and recovery everywhere. There are shuttered restaurants and stores, which are intermingled with new businesses popping up in their place. I saw homeless encampments that are sitting adjacent to increasingly busy roads. And then just day to day, we see newspaper headlines that leave us feeling torn between pessimism, like a headline that says $1 billion in economic activity was lost with conventions and tourism not occurring over the past year. As well as optimism, like the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, bringing $100 million in economic activity to the city. So as we look toward recovery, we also have to remember that downtown still reflects the heart of many social justice issues that received renewed attention during the pandemic time. And so with the pause that the pandemic has put on the evolution of downtown Denver, the question we're asking today is really, what can we expect once public health guidance eases up and we're able to safely return and congregate in our downtown? In other words, what does the future hold for downtown Denver? And personally, I'm really excited by the group of people we have on our panel today because they're just the right people to answer these difficult questions. So I'm going to introduce them all, and then I'll give them a chance to provide some opening remarks. But our panelists include Emily Brett, who's the Director of Economic Development at the Downtown Denver Partnership, where she directs research activities and serves as the lead author of the partnership's major reports, such as the State of Downtown Denver. Emily's work also focuses on recruitment and retention of companies and retailers, housing and neighborhood development, and mobility initiatives. We also have Kevin Foley joining us, and he's the Managing Director at Jones Lang LaSalle, where he and his team are responsible for the leasing efforts in a portfolio of institutionally owned Class AA and A buildings in the Central Business District, totaling approximately 3.2 million square feet. Kevin has nearly 30 years of experience in various commercial real estate functions, so we're thrilled to have his perspective. Third on the panel, we have Brad Siegel. He's president of Progressive Urban Management Associates, or PUMA, a Denver-based real estate economics and planning firm specializing in downtown and community development. Brad has nearly 35 years of experience and is considered a leading authority on downtown trends, strategic planning, and improvement districts. Prior to establishing PUMA, he was the Downtown Denver Partnership Senior Director. And fourth on our panel, we have Cara Veach, who was selected by Governor Jared Polis in February 2019 to serve as the State Personnel Director and Executive Director of the Department of Personnel and Administration. As part of this work, she's overseen equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts to ensure the state workforce reflects the community it serves, and employees are able to break down systematic barriers to reach their full potential. In addition to the expertise that you can see amongst the panelists, it's also really great to see the many connections between each of you and CU Denver and the CU system more broadly. So thank you for participating today. And at this point, we're going to give each panelist a few minutes to share some opening remarks on the subject and their unique perspective. But we also have three poll questions for you as the audience to share some of your own experiences and thoughts as our panelists kick things off. Also, throughout the event, feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many as possible towards the end of our hour. So with that, I am actually going to turn things over.
Everyone for viewing this webinar today. We're going to multitask you because we have the poll going on and then we also have a presentation. And what I'm going to do to set some context today is in 5 minutes or less, give us the state of the world and how that's going to potentially impact downtown Denver moving forward. So in Todd's introduction, he mentioned that we are a real estate economics and planning firm. And one of the things we worked on was the Downtown Denver plan 15 years ago, looking ahead 20 years. And to help guide that plan, we put together an analysis of different trends that are shaping cities, demographics, lifestyles, different disruptive trends in the economy. And that trend analysis, we've been updating ever since. It not only informed our work 15 years ago, but we have found that it resonates in virtually every community in the United States. So about every 2 or 3 years, we've been updating the trends analysis and looking at different shifts. So these trends are not static. They've actually changed over time. And what we found is that we really just departed a period of time that was very favorable for downtowns. So really over the past 15 years, there were all these converging trends that have been favorable for vibrant downtowns. And you've seen this not only in downtown Denver, but you've seen it throughout the state of Colorado and beyond. So our last trend report was produced in the fourth quarter of 19, and things looked good moving into 2020. And then we all became familiar with this image on your screen with COVID-19. And we agree with many analysts, and I'm sure you've heard this elsewhere, that the pandemic is really more of an accelerator of trends that were already in process, as opposed to something that has changed our world forever. It has changed it in different ways, but again, it really accelerates the trends that were already in place. And of course, COVID wasn't in a vacuum. There were other disruptions that happened as well, including the protests for racial justice that we saw last summer. And this is an example, we feel, of a trend that was already in place that was accelerated by the pandemic. So the movement toward more social equity in our society, really understanding both inequality and also racial justice, converged and became front and center last summer. And then the third element, the third dimension of all of this, of course, is the economic shock and the enormous unemployment and shock to the system for the economy. So last summer, we decided to take another look at our trends report, look at these impacts of the pandemic, and how these accelerating trends were going to shape our downtowns and then downtown Denver moving forward. And with that, I'm going to give you just a few highlights here just to set the stage for moving forward. So we're pretty optimistic about the recovery. We think the recovery by historic standards will be relatively short. We think you'll see tangible difference, particularly in downtown Denver, over the next 6 to 18 months, and then largely full recovery in most sectors within about 3 years. And so why do we think that? One, we are banking heavily on younger generations bouncing back from the pandemic relatively quickly. So as the health situation stabilizes, as we see more vaccinations, it's that younger population, both millennials and Gen Z, that we're fueling a lot of the experience and entertainment economy that has been most hard hit by the pandemic. So we see that coming back relatively quickly. It's also important to note that we see the summer protests for racial justice. We see those as almost on-the-job training for these younger generations as well. And we anticipate this activism will continue and actually will spread into other realms moving forward. Retail, the pandemic accelerated, again, some trends that were in place in retail prior to the pandemic. So a lot of outdated retail brands, outdated shopping malls, other retail concepts, their demise were accelerated by all this. Moving forward, we still see a strong role for bricks and mortar, enormous opportunity for downtowns and downtown Denver. We anticipate a surge in entrepreneurship moving forward. And to the extent that this surge in entrepreneurship can help the recovery of storefronts will be critically important moving forward. Big question mark, and Kevin's going to be talking more about this, but the nature of work and office. It remains a question mark. However, we feel that the flexibility that we're seeing now, that was a trend that was in place prior to the pandemic. That's certainly being accelerated. We may be seeing the end of the 5-day work week in the office, but not the end of the office. So more hybrid type activities, maybe more 2, 3, 4-day work weeks. Office recovery may be more sluggish, but we do expect it to fully recover moving forward. Housing, do we expect downtown housing to fill back up pretty quickly? We expect demand from younger demographics, again, millennials and Gen Z, to put pressure on the housing market. And of course, Denver has been unique in that our housing market has remained relatively robust throughout all of this. However, affordability is going to be critical. If we want younger generations to repopulate vacancies in downtown apartments, these are the generations that have been most affected by the unemployment in the pandemic. So affordability over the next 18 months will be particularly critical in the recovery. Power of place. The pandemic really allowed us to be bold and experiment with how we treat public spaces throughout downtown and neighborhoods throughout Denver, throughout the state. And those experiments that worked should hopefully stick. So our understanding, for example, Lermer Square should be more of a permanent activation of that block of Lermer, and there'll be other opportunities throughout downtown and throughout the city. And then that trend for social equity that I mentioned earlier. The pandemic has revealed inequities. It's actually propelled the inequities in our society. There's going to be more activism there. And our counsel, not only to downtown Denver, but all downtowns throughout the country, is business communities are going to need to be more active in coming up with meaningful solutions on a whole variety of equity issues. So getting getting outside, if you will, the safety of the central business district, working with local government partners to look at meaningful solutions for a variety of social ills. So my final slide, the crystal ball, what do we expect moving forward? We do expect the trends will remain favorable for downtown Denver. We do expect that younger generations will continue to relish urban experiences, including our downtown. Great opportunity to curate our storefronts, think of our ground floor in a little bit different way. Office market, we expect will recover, although it could lag in other sectors. Housing affordability will be key. Taking advantage of these public space innovations, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And then, of course, economic opportunity, racial justice need to be key core values as we rethink downtown and as we encourage new investment in downtown. So with that, I'll turn it back to Todd.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad. It's so nice to have your firm located here in Denver for all of us to benefit from, and really appreciate the overview you provided. And next we'll turn to Emily Britt, who will give some opening remarks as well from her perspective in Denver.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and happy Friday. Thanks for being here with us today to talk about the future of downtown. And thanks, Brad, for a perfect introduction to my few slides I have here. So I'm going to go through about 5 slides that are very graphs number heavy. But in the back of your minds, I want you, as you're looking at these numbers and trends and graphics, I want you to think of, the pictures that you have in your mind of the experiences that you've had in downtown that are super memorable. The St. Patrick's Day parade, the Broncos Super Bowl parade, New Year's Eve parade of lights, and as everyone has talked about already, and we'll talk about, what this means for everyone is people, right? You see these crazy shots of in your head and memories of being surrounded by people. And that's what we've all missed over this last 15 months. We haven't had that experience of just being in a sea of people, and the emotions that brings back are mixed. For some people that might seem scary, but I think for a lot of us, it brings up some, real kind of visceral emotions of what we miss as humans. And that is really what downtown provides. So at the Downtown Denver Partnership, I have been tracking data about downtown for 8 years now. And the pandemic really provided kind of a fun opportunity for me to find kind of new high frequency indicators that tell us kind of in real time what's happening. And so this is a total kind of downtown user, downtown activity metric that tracks how many individual people are in the downtown area every day. So this starts on January 1st, 2020 and goes through just a few days ago through last weekend. And you see pre-pandemic, the downtown area saw about 250,000 people on average, and that's a total of visitors, employees, and residents. And what you see is that visitors kind of are the largest group, about 2/3, depending on kind of the day and the time of year. And then employees are our next largest group. And then residents are kind of third. And sometimes, as you can see, kind of get drowned out by, especially pre-pandemic, by these other 2 user groups. Then you can clearly see when the pandemic hit on this graph. And what I like to point out in these months of, April and May, and March, April, May of last year, is that all of a sudden employees were residents were the dominant group. And if you spent any time downtown during these months last year, it did feel like it felt like a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. And it was especially in the kind of lower downtown where we do have a concentration of residents. It was kind of an interesting experience. So then you see we've had a very slow recovery in terms of people spending time downtown, but that is really accelerating over the last 3 weeks. So we kind of see, I think our low point is going to be that big snowstorm on March 14th, kind of coincidentally 1 year after everything shut down. And I think, this last, few weeks since that date is really the start of the really return of the visitor. You can see the employee has not, returned in super high numbers, but we do expect that to begin to kind of tick up shortly. And then because opening day was last weekend, I wanted to just show this real quick too, that we saw opening day, we saw 30,000 more visitors in downtown than the last few Thursdays. And we know the stadium only had about 20,000 people capacity. So, we know that there were a lot of people that came downtown on opening day, and for the rest of the weekend looked like this as well, just to enjoy the space. So I hope a lot of you were able to enjoy that as well. In January, we also tried to take out our crystal ball, just like Brad did, and we looked at how we believe that people are going to return to downtown. And you can see the actual kind of downtown users. This is the same data that I was showing before, that the average amount of people downtown every day is about 250,000. So you can see the dark blue is actual and the forecast is green. And for the 3 months of forecast versus actual that we have data for, we're tracking pretty close. So, we see that in this green graph that we see a pretty kind of steep increase over the next few months and really over the next year. And then we see kind of our new normal settling in slightly below our old normal for kind of the rest of 2022. And that really has to do with, employees not kind of maybe fully recovering, and then also business travel and conventions maybe not fully recovering for another year or so. But the difference between 250,000 average and 215,000 is not going to be a measurable impact or a noticeable impact to anyone spending time. So we do expect downtown to return to its vibrancy, however, in a kind of different in different buckets of different people and how they spend their time. And why we are so optimistic is that Denver, and downtown specifically, has continued to grow our population during the pandemic. So we've been tracking quite a few leading indicators on population growth and migration, which is very challenging to measure in real time. And also with all the delays in the census data, it's challenging to measure this. But I'll show you a few of the reasons and the data points of why we are bullish on Denver specifically as compared to some other cities and our recovery. So this is the latest BLS data, and you see that Denver over the last year, and I'm just noticing a typo on this. This is change in labor force, February 20 to February 21. I'm sorry, this data just came out a few days ago, so I haven't updated this fully until right before this presentation. But you see that Denver has grown our labor force by 1%, which is really amazing in this super disruptive, tragic pandemic that has decimated the labor force of a lot of other cities. You see this is just the top 30 metros, but you can see how well Denver is performing. And this trend has been month over month, the same thing we're seeing. Similarly, LinkedIn, Denver was a city that people were moving, young people, in demand workforce were moving to pre-pandemic. We see that continuing post-pandemic. And then downtown specifically, we're continuing to see an increase in total occupied units. So we like to look at total occupied units because there's so much supply being added to downtown that certainly the vacancy rate has increased a little bit, although it's always bounced all over the place. Rents have declined, which is a good thing because more people are able to afford to be in downtown. But we are continuously year over year, quarter over quarter, increasing total occupied units. So that is why we feel confident that downtown will recover. There will be fundamental changes, which we agree with everything that Brad said about the kind of fundamental adjustments and opportunities that this seismic shift has provided for downtown Denver. But we think that because we're continuing to attract people, attract companies, attract talent, we will be able to return to those busy memories of downtown that we have from the past.
Thank you so much, Emily. It's so nice to see the graphs and the analysis that you've got going on, and a real sense of optimism kind of pervades the data, which is great. Well, next we'll turn to Kevin Foley, and Kevin, right, is going to be able to give us a bit of a perspective on the commercial real estate side of downtown.
Yeah, great, thanks, Todd. So I will kind of preface by saying that I live in my myopic little world of office space, and so I don't get too deep into the weeds of some of the social and political issues that go on. So I'll be the simpleton of the presentation. So I will just start off by saying, kind of give a long-term prognostication relative to office space in the downtown market, and kind of maybe what post-pandemic office space might look like. So I think I'll just start off by telling you a little bit, maybe give you a little bit of a long-term perspective. And I want to do that because, when I get into the short-term perspective, it gets it gets a little darker for the time being. And so I tend to be a glass half full guy, but we do have some challenges in downtown right now. So I'll hit on some of those. But I guess what I would start off by saying is our general feeling about downtown in the long term, and by long term, I mean, let's just say 3 to 5 years, the basic fundamentals remain in place as to why we've performed well over the past 5 to 10 years, just in general. We continue to get good in-migration, as I'm sure Emily has touched on and can show you statistics on. It still tends to be the place where millennials prefer to be. It's really where the public transportation, the infrastructure has been developed more fully vis-a-vis the light rail and how everything hub and spokes into downtown. And it's really kind of where the majority of private investment to a large extent has occurred over the past 5 or 10 years. So what I would say is on a long-term basis, I feel very bullish about downtown and certainly will continue to outperform some of the other markets around the country. The slide I have up right now, I just threw this out. I don't know, some of the people that are here participating, might not be in and out of downtown on a regular basis like some of us in the panel are. But I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a primer. This is downtown, obviously. I'm colorblind, so I'm not going to start trying to pick out the colors here. But I will say that you can see the main micro markets of downtown are the Lodo Union Station area, what we call the West CBD, which is the office towers butting up against lower downtown, the Midtown area, which is historically where most of the high rises were, and then uptown, east side, where Wells Fargo Center and some of those buildings are, and where it butts up against uptown. So I point this out because we've really had a historical trend, and when we talk about downtown Denver and how it's going to perform, it's really a bit of a tale of two cities, and has been so for quite a few years now. The prognosis for lower parts of downtown is very favorable, very strong. The upper parts of downtown, as I'm sure Emily would probably understand just from her time downtown, the upper parts of downtown, it's a little bit murkier. And so me as a leasing agent, I'm a hero for my clients that I'm leasing space for in Lodo, and I'm a zero for my clients that I'm leasing space for at, up on Broadway. And that really is just a function of, where people want to be as we sit today, and where the millennials want to be, and where employers are trying to locate to put themselves in the path of the millennials. And a lot of that has to do with just that trend to Union Station. As good as Union Station was for downtown, it was a little bit of a blow for upper downtown because it solidified lower downtown, not only as the cool spot, but also as the hub of public transportation. So we're also dealing with some oil and gas pullback, which tends to be concentrated on the upper part of downtown. So that's kind of affected that area. And unfortunately, some of the social issues and unrest have occurred more in the upper portions of downtown. So I just preface some of the things I say just to kind of point out downtown is not just one big animal. There's little micro sections that are very strong, some that are just okay, and some that are actually not performing very well at all. And I think this map also kind of orients you to some of the other up and coming neighborhoods as we define them, and as Denver Partnership defines them: Prospect, Ballpark, Arapahoe, Rhino. Those areas are all contributing towards kind of a broadening out of where people office in downtown Denver, and kind of dragging people away just from 17th Street, which historically was there where everybody was located. So, that kind of all being said, so on a short-term basis, I guess what I would tell you is, we're going to feel, and this is from an office perspective, we're going to feel some pain, and we already are feeling some pain from an office perspective in downtown. We probably have around 7 million or so available square feet. In context, it's in a 31 million square foot market. So you've got 6 Republic Plazas floating around, a vacant space floating around right now. And you can see the numbers I highlighted on this slide just to show you the effect of the last year. We were sitting at a direct vacancy rate of 12.4% with a total vacancy, and I won't get into some of the semantics there, but a total vacancy of 14%. Here we sit a year later, that direct vacancy has gone up by 5%. And the total vacancy, which includes things like shadow space, as we call it, sublease space, that is pushing into the low to mid 20s. So that there's been a fairly dramatic change that has occurred. And some of that is a function of pullback in the energy sector. Some of it is a function of a lot of space being put on the sublease market for a variety of reasons, work from home, et cetera. And some of that is we were still delivering new office product up until literally in the last 30 days. I think Block 162, the big tower at 15th in California, literally just delivered the product as of the last 30 days. So, we had things still in the pipeline when, things took a downturn in March of last year. So a lot of those factors have contributed to a pretty significant increase in our vacancy rate. And I think that's going to kind of continue over the next one to 2 years before we stabilize and start back on an upward trajectory. We're still in a position where as tenants want to renew their leases, they are looking to give up portions of their space. So we're going to continue to get a slow burn of tenants that want to surrender anywhere between 10, 15, 20, 30% of their space. We're seeing that pretty regularly. There's going to be continued uncertainty for a lot of these corporate real estate directors who don't know what their space needs to look like. I'll touch on that kind of in my last slide. But as much as everybody wants to talk about work from home, hybrids, the future of work, the reality is nobody really knows because we're not back in the office. And I think we're going to have to go through a test phase before people really know what space is built at. So people ask me that question all the time, and I make something up, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I have no idea what's going to happen. But that all being said, I do think it's going to be a 1 or 2 year process as we go back into kind of a reentry mode where we have to spend some time where people are going to continue to kick the can down the road, analyze, evaluate. Look, we're ready to make long-term commitments to office space. We're ready to make long-term commitments to downtown Denver. So that's there's going to be quite a bit of uncertainty in the office world, and there's going to be some duress on a lot of the landlords. I mean, Denver's been a very hot market. A lot of landlords have come into the market over the last 4 or 5 years and paid some fairly high prices with the assumption that rental rates will continue to increase. So now that they're not increasing but decreasing a little bit, that just obviously squeezes their margins significantly. So that's just something that I have to deal with on leasing calls on a regular basis with my clients looking for new tenancy. So I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip kind of through this slide. It kind of predicts where we think we're going from a vacancy percentage. And I'm just going to kind of move on and really touch on what Todd had kind of asked me to touch on a little bit. And what you're looking at right now is, and this is from a white paper that JLL put out on kind of what office space is going to look like. And it was more of a 10-page thing, but for simplicity's sake, I've cut one slide out of it because I think it's very representative. So really everybody's trying to decide right now between office-centric, hybrid, remote first type of attitudes for their office space. And everybody feels that it's going more towards a hybrid potentially. I mean, it varies by industry, obviously. I lease office space for a living. So guess what? I'm coming to my office because I'm going to walk the walk. But I do believe that a lot of people will go to a hybrid, whether it's an 80% hybrid, a 70% hybrid, whatever that hybrid is, we don't know. So the long story short is, I think when spaces people will come back to the space they already had, but as spaces start to get rebuilt, people move, they start to look at new configurations. This kind of gives you an idea what it might look like. When people come back to the office, it's going to be more about collaborating and connecting when they get there. And so if you look at this historically, you can see that in the red box, most of the space was dedicated to offices and workstations. And then you had what would collaborate. It's collaboration spaces now, not conference rooms, but just so you know. But you had collaboration, you had some amenities, a little foosball table, you had maybe some meeting rooms. You can see the change in what they're predicting for that model going forward. And so people will come together. They've already been remote. When they come back, it's to connect with the people in their office. It's not to go sit in their own isolated little spot. If they wanted to do that, they can sit in their basement at home. So they'll come in for meetings, training sessions, whatever it happens to be. So this might be what it looks like. The one thing you'll notice is the box on the right is slightly smaller than the box on the left, which would indicate that guys like me that are in the office leasing business, the pie is going to be a little bit smaller going forward. So I'm looking for part-time work if anybody's hiring, but that's really it. This is just, it's really early on. I don't think people know it's going to be a whole new cottage industry for consultants, the Gensler types of the world that are going to come up with new models of how this is going to look, and but this is just kind of a starting point as to what the future might look like in terms of office space configuration. So that's all I've got to say right now, guys.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. The insight is really helpful. You can only get so much kind of from the media about what's going on with commercial real estate. So it's great to have the inside scoop,
Sure.
despite the uncertainty. So next we'll turn to Cara, and Cara brings kind of the perspective of from the state of Colorado. And for Denver, public employers are huge, right? Whether it's the city and county, whether it's the state, whether it's the university, or Denver public schools. So it's really important, I think, for us to understand, right, the government perspective on the evolution of downtown. And so we're thrilled to have Cara here, and I'll turn it over to her for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Todd. Paul and Todd, I'm on to you. When you say you can submit slides, I hear now you must submit slides. So sorry to everyone in the audience who's taken time out of your day. I don't have any slides. So I'll just kind of give you a perspective as a large customer in the Denver real estate market. So the Department of Personnel Administration, in addition to overseeing personnel, we also oversee real estate, and that is maintaining our buildings, building new buildings, and our lease space. And we have about 30,000 employees if you don't count higher ed. 46% of those are in the metro area. We leased 3 million square feet in office space across the state, 741,000 square feet in just the downtown area. And we have a goal to reduce our, kind of in line with what Kevin said, to reduce our square footage from 3 million by 1 million by 2025. So we will be getting rid of 1 million square feet in office space and really looking at how do we better utilize owned space. So we also own about 20 buildings around the Capitol. And so how do we better utilize those? Also, to Kevin's point, how do we change those buildings so they're more collaborative spaces, right? Where are those spaces that we're bringing people back to work for intent, not just to work in a cubicle next to someone else working in a cubicle. So that requires us to change our office space. Two things are really driving this for us. As Brad said, the pandemic's been an accelerator really for us. In 2019, we surveyed employees about what was it they most wanted to see as an employer. And of course it was pay, more merit pay, and flexible work arrangements. And at that time we were like, well, maybe we could get to 10% working remotely, or maybe they could work one day at home, and we're being so bold, maybe one day at home a week, because we're also very aware as public servants that we can't be seen like at the grocery store when we're supposed to be working, right? We have a different level and standard as recipients of taxpayer dollars to perform work for Coloradans. So through the pandemic, like everyone, we pivoted in a heartbeat to remote work. Not counting higher ed, we are about 60% of employees working remotely right now, at least 50% of the time. And while that doesn't sound like a lot, you have to think there's a whole section of state employees who can't work remotely: correctional officers, transportation, human services, public safety. So there's a big group of us, and those are 3 of our biggest departments who can't. But almost all of our office workers are working remotely. And when we talked to them in 2019, it was really like one day every other week. And now they're saying, I want to come back one day every other week. And really just for those collaborative discussions, strategic planning, training, brainstorming. The other side of this that is driving us is how do we continue to accelerate services for our customers? And so this will look like continuing to have online services. So whether you can renew your driver's license on your phone, for example, instead of having to go into the office, having virtual meetings. So one of the things the department oversees is the Office of Administrative Courts. And in the past year, we've had remote hearings. So how do we continue to offer that as an option for our customers? How do we have appointment-based services so that you can just walk in and meet rather than waiting in long lines. And so you're seeing a lot of that. How do we better utilize technology to deliver services? And so lots of focus for government on that. And so overall, really looking to reduce our square footage. When I talk to other states, it's also consistent with other states doing this and how we envision government changing, and what we call it reimagining state government, in both how and where we deliver government services and how and where we house state employees. So over the next few years, you'll see a big change for us in both how much lease space we have, where we house our employees, so not more in our own buildings. And this will be a big change for them because some of them are in Class A space in Denver, and a lot of our state buildings are not Class A space. So how do we invest in the real estate that we do own to make that a place that employees want to go to and are proud to bring customers into? So lots of work for us in the next few years on this.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Cara. Yeah, great perspective, and I think it's always important to remind people kind of the presence, right, of public employees in Denver and the influence, right, that decisions by the state and the city and county have on downtown. So with that, I'm going to shift a little bit to just share our poll results and move into some questions and answers here. So. You should be able to see these results on your screen, and maybe these aren't that surprising to you, but it's nice to kind of take the pulse of the audience. And so what we see here is that over 70% of you responded that you're actually in the office 0 days a week for your job, and only 5%, right, are actually in kind of the traditional work week, right, 5 days a week. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And, we've heard some great commentary on this issue already. And if you look at the second question, it's really about looking into the future, right? And in the long term, in your professional life, how often do you expect to be in the office? And what's interesting here is that, right, only 17% of the respondents said 5 days a week. Or more, and we have 15% that said they don't expect to be in the office, right? And then kind of a distribution across the other number of days, right? With, 28%, right, saying 3 days per week. So I think that reflects what we heard in the overviews. What Kevin talked about, kind of the evolution of the office, and also what the state's, right, considering. In addition to just the actual visitation numbers and numbers of people working downtown, kind of slowly recovering. So thank you for responding to that. And really, I'll go ahead and talk through the results to the second question, because I think it leads to the question I'd like to ask the panel. And then at that point, I'm actually going to jump into some of the questions and answers from the audience, which are very good. So, the last poll question was just, in your opinion, is the pandemic the beginning of a long-term decline for central cities and Denver? Is it just a temporary interruption, right, in the prominence of Denver and other central cities? Or is it the start of a renaissance, right, for urban areas? And so the majority, right, 60% of the respondents said just a temporary interruption, right? And then we'll probably be back to the path we were on before the pandemic. But 35%, right, a very substantial amount actually see this, right, as an opportunity, for, a change and right, new trends in the urban space in downtown Denver. So, with that, I'd just like to ask the panel members, and to stay maybe on the trend of optimism for a little while, just what the greatest opportunity is that you see for downtown Denver to embrace as it emerges from the pandemic. And Brad mentioned, right, Larimer Square is a good example, right? That things have happened from a policy perspective that wouldn't have been able to take place, right, in prior years. So feel free to jump in if you have something here, but basically what's the big opportunity for the city and downtown?
So yeah, I'll start. So I certainly believe that this is the beginning of maybe not a renaissance, but a reimagining of our relationships between where we live, work, and spend time. And I think that, as Brad mentioned, we have been trying to convert places that are, so much of our downtown space is dedicated to car and vehicle traffic. And we've been trying to decrease that and increase the amount available to people, to bikes and to commerce and businesses for, since the downtown area plan, right, in 2007. So this pandemic allowed us to kind of test out a lot of things we never would have been able to do pre-pandemic. And, had everyone kind of see that this works and we don't need these streets. So, having that become permanent, having more kind of outdoor spaces, less kind of bureaucracy and red tape around outdoor consumption, patio space, and really, again, returning the space to the people. I think that's kind of one of the biggest things. And then I think, the second kind of opportunity is that we've been, working since the 70s and 80s to make downtown a place that is not just a central business district for office workers, right? So while it is, certainly a challenge that we are going to have to work through to have a significant amount of vacant office space, and I don't mean to minimize that challenge at all. It's definitely a big, issue for us, but we also see that as an opportunity to continue to increase residents downtown and visitors downtown, which we have been, year over year, decade over decade. And, while kind of maybe converting some of these office buildings into residential space is more challenging than it seems, that's something we can explore. But it also provides an opportunity for, people to continue to live in downtown, but, maybe not having to kind of work in downtown. They can work in a company that's located, halfway around the world or some other place in the country. So we see the pie growing. We see a big opportunity for kind of hybrid experiences where, two offices kind of share, two companies share kind of an office and each go in 2 days a week. Those 2 days that you're in the office, you're going to be out and about in downtown. You're going to be spending money. So it's more wallets in the long run. In the short run, there's a challenge of a glut of vacant spaces.
I would just quickly add to what Emily said. I mean, one of the challenges that we faced in downtown over the past few years, as we've done so well as a city, is it has become a more expensive place on a lot of different levels. I mean, if you got to park your car, or if you go to a restaurant, or you want to lease office space, and I guess it may not always be to the benefit of some of my clients who own office space or retail space or whatever happens to be downtown, but this might be a little bit of a reset to some degree, just on kind of at a price point where maybe we'll start to see some green shoots coming out of this pandemic. I mean, obviously we've lost a lot of restaurants and other retail type operations, which has been really bad. It's a real bummer. But I think there's going to be some opportunities where people are going to want to kind of get their space leased. They're going to be more aggressive, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for some people to come up with new concepts, new restaurants, new retail spaces, and people that maybe couldn't have afforded it a year and a half ago. So that's maybe one perspective I would add.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else with opportunities? All right. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, just add real quick. I don't know if it's so much an opportunity, but an imperative. And Kevin, you were leaning into it. But the storefront economy in downtown, there has to be huge focus on that over the next 6 to 18 months. And the opportunity is how we repopulate some of these vacant storefronts, the opportunity for more local business concepts. And then lastly, related to all this is the opportunity for opportunity. Can we be a more inclusive downtown? Can we celebrate the different cultures that we've got in this city? Can we be more deliberate about inviting opportunity for jobs, for investment to communities that have not felt comfortable downtown, and be more Denver centric about our downtown? There's been this and I'll try to make this short, but we've been thinking about a world-class city, and we really just need to think about Denver as a wonderful city for the community that we have, and really capture this period of time to really bring that essence of Denver back into the city and just be more inviting of the people we already have.
In just 2 seconds, the Downtown Denver Partnership is hyper-focused on the storefront and the ground floor experience. And we have a significant plan kind of rolling out, and we're just kind of putting all the pieces together. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that and seeing some really exciting opportunities in the future months.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. All great responses. And, I'm going to go ahead and try to integrate some of the questions that we have from the audience. And this is one that was on my mind as well. Emily mentioned cars and, Kevin mentioned parking. And so one of the questions we have is just how important is transit in the future of downtown? And we know bus routes, right, have been challenged. Mass transit has been really stressed, right, despite receiving resources, from the federal government recently. So, is the new normal in downtown going to be more people driving because of a discomfort? Just how does transportation kind of play into this story of downtown recovery?
Well, I can start again, but so it's a huge risk, and it's also an opportunity. So we have been working to get people to rethink their commutes and get out of their single occupancy vehicles, for almost a decade now, and I think that the pandemic provides huge risks to that, because people are not going to be comfortable in transit. Even if they are, their routes may have been reduced or they may have moved. So I think there's a lot of issues where people are going to utilize transit less. Certainly at the beginning and right now, we're going to see the vast majority of people that are coming downtown using their own cars. At a certain point, and we're monitoring this traffic, consistently, it's going to start getting to be unmanageable. I think the biggest opportunity is for cycling. So the only thing that was harder to get a year ago than toilet paper was a bicycle. So bicycle sales have skyrocketed. So many people, we see this in real time, kind of use data from Strava that we have, that the amount of leisure rides last year, the total amount of rides increased from like 350,000 to 450,000 in the Denver metro area. Obviously commute rides were down because no one was commuting, but our opportunity moving forward is to turn those leisure riders into commute riders, to really take advantage of the cycling infrastructure that we've built as a community, and all of the new riders that now have bikes. So we have a lot of, in our kind of office reopening, our kind of welcome back to downtown campaign that we'll be launching in a couple of weeks. There's a lot of resources for employers and employees. We're looking at things like putting a kind of a bike station. There's a lot of kind of rider kind of assistance stuff rolling out. So we think that's kind of our biggest opportunity, is to have people rethink their commute.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Emily. And I would just, follow up with a question of, and this one might go to Kevin primarily, but, we've heard talk in other places of kind of commercial buildings and real estate being converted, right, for other uses. And we did get a question in the chat box about whether there is a discussion of converting excess office space into residential space or other uses, and whether that's a feasible thing, both from an engineering and architecture perspective, but also kind of a planning perspective.
It's a really interesting question. I do think we were already facing something in downtown, with such a focus over the past few years to the millennial workforce and catering to your employees, which is such a foreign concept to people my age, but I'm trying to embrace it as best I can and make sure all the young people, their life is perfect and we take care of all that. But I will say this, that we have, there's been a real, in downtown, there's been a real flight to quality in terms of office space. I mean, people, when prices go up, like people have taken a little bit of a different tack now than they did 10, 15 years ago. people are paying more and they're justifying it because they want more natural light. They want higher ceilings. They want better air conditioning systems. And what's happened by virtue of that is even as some of these new $50, $60 a square foot office towers have gone up in and around downtown Union Station, you've had a whole other segment of buildings that have become, to some degree, and I won't name any buildings, but that have become functionally obsolete to a large degree. I have buildings where landlords have come in, they bought them, they've spent millions of dollars to try and fix them up, 50s, 60s, 70s vintage buildings, and it just still doesn't resonate to a large degree, and those buildings still struggle at times. And so there's a lot of buildings that the tenant world is considering from their perspective to be functionally obsolete at this point. They don't like them anymore, no matter what the price is. So there is some preliminary discussion of some conversions on some buildings. It's too early, but I definitely think that's a trend that will accelerate in the next few years as vacancies pop up, and the vacancy is increasing more in those types of buildings. So it's a topic we'll have over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. It remains to be seen, I guess, on a lot of this, but it sounds like there's opportunity there as well. Some of the other questions, I know we're running low on time and we always try to end on time, but I do just want to highlight some of the issues that are being raised, right? And this just maybe we need a part two to continue our discussion. Some individuals expressed questions about a lot of the intractable issues that downtown's facing, like homeless populations, affordability issues, right? And kind of pushing back a little, right, on the optimistic view. And there's some other questions that you can see related to that, as we talk about recovery, right? There's obviously winners and losers to a certain degree, right? So the equity issues that were brought up by some of our panelists, I think, are really important, and something, right, that maybe we in the future can talk more about, right, as a community in this type of forum. There's also a really interesting question about what downtown Denver represents, and in terms of geography, and I think Kevin addressed a little bit of that from a commercial real estate perspective. But the very interesting observation of how has that definition changed over time? And I think that really leads into some of the big kind of cornerstone projects, right, that are taking place, either planned or underway, that are going to push the boundaries, right, of what we think about as downtown, and potentially change, right, a lot of the dialogue that we're having today. So really important, and a good point there. There's also some talk about just revenue, right? And kind of whether new sources of revenue are going to be needed, right, to continue to invest in our downtown, which is important as well. And I would say, Brad and Emily, a lot of interest in storefronts, and what it means to be kind of an entrepreneurial storefront, and how to support, right, that part of the economy. So I think the work both of you are doing in that space is hugely beneficial. And with that, I apologize that we don't have more time to discuss these and get the panel's feedback. But just to end on time, I just want to thank everyone. What a great group on the panel, a tremendous amount of expertise. And Cara, the government perspective, I'm so happy to have reflected here, because I think it's so important. And I also just wanted to thank all the attendees for being here and staying engaged during a time that isn't the easiest to do so. And we really hope to see you at future events, whether it be virtual or hybrid or in person. But thank you for the contributions today. And please do feel free to follow up with any lingering questions to keep this dialogue going. So thanks again, much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.